There's a part of the country where the towns get smaller and smaller. The rivers turn colours that don't seem natural. And the hills start hiding more than they show. You can cross 4 states without realising you've been in the same range the whole time. This is the Ozarks. The people who came up into these hills in the 1800s settled around the water. They built mills next to the springs, cut their houses out of the bluffs and stayed. Though not every town up here lasted. One burned to the ground twice in 26 years, and ended up a tourist attraction inside its own city limits. Underneath these hills there's a system of caves nobody's ever fully mapped. And something living down there has never seen the sun. This is the Ozarks, a place most of the country has never really seen. Until now. The granite boulders at Elephant Rocks are older than almost any surface rock visible anywhere in the American Midwest. Celebrating their 1.5 billion years old, these boulders never formed above ground. Created entirely underground and rounded while they were still buried, the thing that got them above in full display was none other than erosion. These gigantic stones are actually still moving. The frost is expanding in their cracks every winter, and the gravity is pulling them down slope, fraction by fraction. The process it just slowed down enough that no one really notices. A 100 miles south, Rush Ghost Town went through the same process. Prospectors working the Buffalo River region in the late 1800s were looking for lead. What they found instead was one of the richest zinc deposits in the American Midwest. During World War I, the zinc price shot up and the population briefly hit several thousand. When the war ended, the zinc price crashed, and the town with it. The mine that produced millions of pounds of metal and attract miners from across the country is still there. It once ran day and night to supply a world war, and now it's just a bat colony place. Some call it the only true ghost town between the Mississippi River and the Rocky Mountains. Cross back into Missouri, and there is the lake that swallowed an entire river system, and more. Lake of the Ozarks was the largest man-made lake in America. Beneath all that water, 3 whole towns are still down there, all submerged when the dam closed. Locals have nicknames for parts of the lake most maps don't even bother labelling. It's not just those towns, unfortunately. The lake swallows roughly 20 people every year. The long shoreline with coves that dead end without warning, and boat traffic that never fully stops, makes it one of the most dangerous recreational lakes in the United States. And above it all, the lake's most notorious feature isn't even geological. It's a shallow inlet called Party Cove, so infamous for alcohol, crowds and drownings that it eventually drew federal investigations and a permanent US Coast Guard presence to a patch of water that used to be a farm. Before it became a lake, this was the Osage River, and the people who lived here gave the river everything but the spelling. They called themselves Washaja, meaning people of the middle waters, which French traders mangled into Osage. The river cut so deeply into the Ozark Plateau over millions of years that when the valley flooded, the water filled every hollow, creek drainage, and side canyon in the region. The water also carries paddlefish that look almost identical to fossils from the age of dinosaurs, basically swimming time machines. The thing that turned the whole river into a lake is a single concrete wall named Bagnell Dam. Construction began 2 months before the 1929 stock market crash. While the rest of the country starved, men here got 35 cents an hour, and they were grateful because farm work paid 50 cents a day. And when they completed the project in 1931, it was the largest hydroelectric dam in the world. When the lake filled, the water backed up into one of the most beautiful springs in Missouri and ruined it. Above that spring sits Tonka, the most haunted-looking ruin in the state. The man who built it never saw it finished. 1 year into construction, he was killed in an automobile accident, documented as one of the first car fatalities in Kansas City's history. His sons finished the castle 16 years later, but it only stood fully intact for exactly 2 decades. A spark from a chimney ignited the roof, and in only 1 day, a 2-generation work was burned into the ground, leaving only the limestone shell behind. The water tower lasted another 34 years, until vandals burned that down too. The park surrounding the ruins is a geological catalogue of Ozark karst formed out of sinkholes, caves, sheer bluffs, and the spring, all within walking distance of each other. The land the castle was built on was never stable in any geological sense. The irony is complete. A man spent a fortune building permanence on top of a landscape that dissolves. And then another French fur traders called a town Calico Rock Historic District because of the bluffs themselves. Calico Rock was burned to the ground twice in 26 years. Compared with other ones, even after the second fire, the town rebuilt entirely in brick and local stone. The entire economic identity shifted 3 times in under a century, from steamboat landing to railroad hub to highway town, each shift arriving fast and departing faster. The East History District was never rebuilt and never cleared. In 2007, the community formalised it as a ghost town tourist attraction, making Calico Rock one of the only places in America where you can walk from a functioning main street into a designated ghost town without leaving the city boundary. "20 miles west, there is a river that has no dam, no town built on its terms, and no compromise with anything. The Buffalo is the very first national river in American history, designated exactly 100 years to the day after Yellowstone became the first national park. Entire sections of the river run underground during dry summers, disappearing into the gravel and resurfacing hundreds of yards downstream as if nothing happened. The river valley contains over 100 documented cave entrances along its corridor, and many of them have never been fully explored. The night sky above the river corridor is among the darkest in Arkansas because there are no major cities within 60 miles, no industrial lighting, and no infrastructure dense enough to bleed light upward. This aspect created the perfect opportunity for the Upper Buffalo Wilderness. This section is essentially the closest thing the Ozarks has to virgin forest. There is exactly one official trail in the entire 12,000 acres of wilderness. Everything else is unmarked old logging roads and faint traces left by people who stopped using them decades ago. There aren't even guardrails at the parking lot. It's the kind of place that reminds you the Ozarks were never tamed, just left alone. From the headwaters where the Buffalo begins, the river cuts deeper as it moves east. At Hemmed-In Hollow, it worked deep enough to produce the tallest waterfall between the Rockies and the Appalachians. Honestly, the strangest thing about it is how often it isn't even there. Most of the year it's a thin streak down the rock face, barely a trickle. But after a heavy rain, the entire wall of the canyon turns into a thunderous waterfall. The falls fill the hollow with cold air and mist, and on a bare branch above the pool at the bottom, completely unbothered, is a belted kingfisher watching the water. It's one of the very few American bird species where the female is actually more colourful than the male. The kingfishers from this area nest by drilling tunnels into the exposed dirt banks above the waterline, angled slightly upward so rainwater drains out rather than flooding the nest chamber at the end. Nature builds into the bluff walls along the Buffalo. So it turns out did the Catholic Church. St. Elizabeth in Eureka Springs was constructed directly against the Arkansas hillside, entered not through a front door, but through the bell tower, the way almost no other church on earth is entered. The structure is carved so precisely into the slope that the roof sits level with the street, letting visitors walk off the sidewalk and onto it without realising it. The Ozarks, it turns out, are full of surprises. And just across the state line, the Ozark National Scenic Riverways have a few of their own. This was the first river system in American history given full federal protection. Not a canyon, not a mountain, but a river deemed worth saving before anyone had the chance to ruin it. The water doesn't just flow here, it erupts from hundreds of springs, feeding the Current and Jacks Fork rivers, with water so clear you can read a coin on the bottom. That clarity comes at a price. The springs stay permanently cold, cold enough to turn a summer swim into a bad idea fast. Just ahead, one spring does something the others don't. It doesn't seep. It surges, and an old red mill has been standing beside it long enough to have seen everything. That's Alley Spring. The spring pours out an almost absurd volume of water each day, and its vivid blue-green colour, almost unreal, is caused by sunlight hitting minerals dissolved far below the surface. The red mill beside it was built to grind grain for Ozark farming families. At its peak, settlers rode 2 days on horseback just to get their corn milled here. A whole community grew around it, a post office, school and store. Then the government bought the land, and almost overnight everyone left, leaving only the mill. That same current keeps moving, and just downstream, Current River State Park is where the Ozarks slow down, long enough to show you what they're really made of. The Current River is one of the last undammed rivers in the entire Midwest. No reservoirs, no concrete, just water moving exactly the way it always has. Under the park, the limestone is full of sinkholes and collapsed cave ceilings. In places, the ground is little more than a thin shell over empty air, which the deer seem entirely fine with. Settlers chose this stretch because the river seemed stable and predictable. Then one unusually wet season washed entire farms away overnight, and most of them never rebuilt. Stone foundations, root cellars, and old fence lines still sit quietly in the woods, left exactly where those families abandoned them. But the current river hasn't shown its biggest trick yet. Just ahead, Big Spring dumps so much water into the river at once that it visibly changes the river's colour on contact. It's one of the largest single outlet springs in the country, all of it pushing up from a single opening in the rock, every single day, without stopping. That water has spent years filtering through Ozark limestone before it ever sees sunlight, arriving cold, clear, and a blue-green colour that looks almost too perfect to be natural. After heavy rain, though, the whole system gets overwhelmed. The flow surges, the colour turns cloudy grey. All that cold, clear water attracts one animal in particular, the river otter, which has made a very confident comeback here and treats these spring-fed currents like its own personal playground. That recovery is significant. By the mid-1900s, otters had been wiped out in Missouri, hunted for their fur until none remained, then gradually reintroduced decades later. In the water, they're built for control and power, sealing their ears and nostrils shut, holding their breath for minutes, and chasing fish that most predators wouldn't attempt. Their coat is key to survival, packed so densely it traps air and keeps their skin completely dry even after long periods underwater. They eat almost anything the river provides: fish, crayfish, frogs, and even small turtles, consuming roughly a quarter of their body weight each day. The family group, known as a romp, spends much of its time in motion, rolling, sliding, and wrestling, to sharpen the reflexes needed for fast-moving currents. They're also highly communicative, using a range of chirps, whistles, growls, and screams, with some groups even showing slight regional differences in their calls. Along the banks, scent marking is just as precise, signals detailed enough to reveal both identity and timing, turning rocks into a running message board. To maintain that insulating layer, they groom constantly, not just for bonding but to keep their coat clean and effective in cold water. Some have even been seen using rocks as tools, cracking open shellfish while floating on their backs. A behaviour rare enough among mammals to stand out. Where otters hunt near the surface, something else is watching from above. The Osprey, a fish-hunting raptor that has learned to read the current river like a map and rarely misses. It's the only hawk on Earth that dives feet first into water, dropping from over 100 feet in the air and hitting the surface like a feathered missile. Its success rate is unusually high for a predator of its kind. Roughly 1 in every 4 dives results in a catch. Its feet are built for precision. A reversible outer toe lets it lock onto fish with 2 talons forward and 2 back, forming a grip that rarely fails once it connects. Feathers add another advantage, with a slightly oily coating that prevents water from soaking in, allowing it to strike, seize prey, and lift off almost immediately. After impact, it often repositions the catch mid-air, turning fish headfirst to reduce drag and make flight more efficient, even while still airborne. Osprey pairs form lifelong bonds, and each spring the male arrives at the nest first with a fish, a ritual offering that doubles as both greeting and proof of survival. Mated birds often rest side by side on the nest edge, scanning the water in quiet coordination. When food is delivered, the female tears it apart and distributes it to the chicks, ensuring even the smallest receives a share before feeding herself. From a river full of life to a place frozen in time, just across the Arkansas border, Dogpatch, USA sits abandoned, slowly being reclaimed by the forest. It opened as a theme park based on a beloved Ozark comic strip, drew massive crowds for years, and then simply stopped, leaving everything behind, exactly where it stood. No fire, no flood, no dramatic ending. It just ran out of visitors, the gates closed, and nobody came back to collect anything, which somehow makes it stranger than a disaster would. Explorers who've slipped through the fence describe ticket booths with windows still intact, ride cars still sitting on their tracks, and a midway that feels like a Sunday morning that never ended. The forest has been methodically taking it back ever since. Trees splitting the pavement, vines pulling at rooftops, deer wandering through what used to be a petting zoo. Beneath the Arkansas hills, Blanchard Springs Caverns has been doing something far slower and far more extraordinary. The cave is still growing. Each drop of water leaves behind minerals, building formations so slowly that an inch can take over 100 years. Some of those stalactites have been growing since before recorded history, putting everything else into perspective. When explorers pushed deeper, they found a lower level so untouched that its formations had never been exposed to artificial light, some of the most pristine in North America. The Earth takes its time down here, but up in Zinc, everything happened quickly, and the town has been quietly disappearing ever since. At its peak, this tiny corner supplied a significant share of the country's zinc. The money came fast, the town grew just as quickly, and when the ore ran out, most people packed up and left. What's left is less a ghost town than a suggestion of one. A few structures, foundation stones in the grass, and roads to places that no longer exist. Old-timers tell of miners who stayed after the shutdown, convinced hidden ore still existed, while the land still shows shallow pits, spoil piles, and barren patches. Just down the road, Eureka Springs never faded. It doubled down on its past, kept every Victorian storefront standing, and has been quietly flourishing ever since. The town sits on a hillside so steep that buildings often have front doors on one street and back doors on another below, with no two addresses sharing level ground. It was founded on the belief that local spring water could cure almost anything, drawing thousands by train to drink it, and growing so fast the town could barely keep up. When the craze faded, Eureka Springs simply stopped instead of modernising, preserving its Victorian buildings and placing the entire downtown on the National Register of Historic Places. Just outside town, Thorn Crown Chapel sits in the woods, and it's one of those buildings that makes you stop and question everything you thought you knew about architecture. It was built with one rule. Nothing could be wider than what two people could carry through the forest, since there was no road access and no trees were cut to make one. The result soars over 48 feet tall, with more glass than solid wall, making the forest outside feel less like a view and more like the actual room you're sitting in. The American Institute of Architects later named it one of the greatest buildings of the 20th century, alongside structures that cost hundreds of times more and took far longer to complete. Thorn Crown asks you to be still. The little Golden Gate Bridge asks something else entirely, swaying gently over a gorge while you try to look confident about the whole thing. It earns its nickname honestly, painted the same red-orange as its San Francisco counterpart, spanning a gorge at a smaller scale, but with a similar dizzying effect. On windy days, that motion becomes harder to ignore, and some visitors turn around halfway across, their expressions saying everything for them. The region has a way of scaling things unexpectedly, And Christ of the Ozarks, a hilltop statue above Eureka Springs, is one of the more dramatic examples of that. It stands 7 stories tall and weighs over 2 million pounds, built from white concrete and steel. Not delicate, not subtle, and visible from miles away on a clear day. The sculptor kept it minimal. Simple robes, a blank face and short arms, so it reads as a bold silhouette from miles away, a design critics call Gumby Jesus, but works as intended from below. The statue looks out over Ozark National Forest, and what it sees is worth the drive alone. Dense woods, hidden waterfalls, and ridges that turn extraordinary colours every autumn. Spanning more than 1 million acres of Arkansas hill country, the area is so massive that hikers have set out for a day and needed rescuing days later. The sandstone bluffs here were slowly carved by water over an immense period of time, forming overhangs and shelters used by indigenous communities for thousands of years. When autumn arrives, the hardwood canopy ignites in red, orange and gold all at once, shifting the forest into something that feels almost intentionally arranged. Along the ridges, the highlands generate their own weather, trapping moisture and producing fog so thick that hikers can lose the trail within a few steps, while nearby conditions stay clear. In certain stretches known to old-timers as the quiet place, animals go silent and compasses once behaved strangely. Phenomena geologists attribute to iron-rich rock beneath the surface. Flowing through the forest floor, the waterways carry that same cold, mineral-rich clarity found throughout the region. Uncomfortable to swim in, remarkable to look at. At Haw Creek Falls, that clarity becomes a spectacle. Not a dramatic plunge, but a wide, low cascade spreading across flat sandstone ledges, the way water moves across a tilted table. Over time, the rock has been worn so smooth that the current doesn't so much fall as glide, stepping from one level to the next, all the way down to the creek below. In autumn, surrounding hardwoods ignite in orange and red, enclosing the falls in colour and turning the scene into one of the most photographed in the forest. Something large and loud lives in these trees. The pileated woodpecker, a crow-sized bird that attacks dead timber, with such force it can split a log open by the end of an afternoon. The holes it leaves behind are rectangular, rather than round like those of other woodpeckers. Precise, clean-edge cuts that look less like natural pecking and more like something made with actual tools. Each strike lands with the impact of a small hammer, yet its skull absorbs the shock through a specialized structure of spongy bone that withstands thousands of blows a day. Even more unusual is its feeding mechanism, a tongue that coils behind the head when idle, and can extend deep into wood to extract insects hidden several inches inside. Its laughing call is what inspired a famous cartoon character, though the real bird is far more methodical than comedic portrayals suggest. Pairs stay together for life, defending the same territory year after year, and their abandoned nest cavities later become homes for owls, ducks, and small mammals. Despite all this presence, it remains surprisingly difficult to spot, often slipping around the opposite side of a trunk the moment anything approaches, as if always aware of being watched. Beneath the canopy, a quieter system is at work. The grey squirrel, turning the forest floor into a scattered archive of food it only partially remembers where it placed. Each autumn, a single animal buries thousands of acorns, relying on spatial recall strong enough to recover most caches months later under snow, though not everyone makes it back to the surface. Those mist stores sprout into new oak growth, making the species an unintentional driver of regeneration across the Ozarks. Its menu is broad: nuts, berries, fungi, bark, and the occasional bird egg, a flexible diet shaped more by opportunity than specialisation. Winter does not pause its activity, so foraging continues in freezing conditions using that same memory system, with success that is effective but inconsistent. When danger appears, it flattens against a branch and goes still, relying on camouflage and silence to vanish in plain sight, a tactic that works more often than expected. Some individuals have even been observed staging false burials, pretending to cache food while actually keeping it, specifically to mislead competitors nearby. Predators such as hawks, foxes, and the occasional bobcat keep pressure constant, so any movement overhead triggers an instant freeze response. The squirrels have the forest sorted out. Branson, on the other hand, has built an entire economy on noise and spectacle as a completely different kind of survival strategy. It started as a tiny fishing town and became one of the country's most visited entertainment destinations without a coastline, a nearby major city, or a professional sports team. The Strip cuts through the Ozarks with more theatre seats per mile than Broadway, built on nightly live shows, country music, comedy, magic, and variety acts for audiences. Locals will tell you the real Branson is 10 minutes off the Strip, where the hills fall back into trees, and the lake sits completely still at dawn. Proof the forest never actually left. The entertainment ends here, just down the road. Pea Ridge National Military Park marks one of the Civil War's most decisive Western battles, with scars still visible on the land. Union forces were outnumbered and won anyway, a result that kept Missouri in Union hands and shifted the entire Western campaign in a single weekend. Two Cherokee brigades fought for the Confederacy under their own officers, one of the few major Civil War battles with native troops in documented combat on either side. No development, no sprawl. The fields, tree lines and roads look almost unchanged from when thousands of soldiers crossed them, and it's unsettling in a way you only feel on sight. At the centre stands Elkhorn Tavern. It changed hands twice, served as a hospital and command post, and still stands where it did when the smoke cleared. During restoration, bullet holes discovered in the original timber revealed a harsher reality than official accounts suggested. The fighting had been far closer and more intense than recorded. After the battle, the owner returned to find the interior stripped bare, furniture burned for firewood by troops, with little concern for what they were destroying. The structure itself was later rebuilt on the same footprint using the original design, creating a version close enough that standing inside still feels unsettlingly immediate. Not far away, Beaver Lake offers a shift in tone, clear water, quiet hills, and a setting where the weight of history seems to ease. The lake didn't always exist. It was created when the Army Corps of Engineers dammed the White River, flooding entire communities, farmland and roads that still sit somewhere on the bottom. That structure also functions as a power plant, generating electricity for surrounding communities, flood control, and hydropower combined in a single system. Long before this transformation, the Cherokee called the White River Eureka, meaning white, for its remarkable clarity, a quality the lake still holds today. Below the surface, divers occasionally spot submerged fence lines and foundations still more or less intact, making it one of the stranger places to swim in Arkansas. In dry summers, falling water levels expose old roads and forgotten fence posts, as if the land briefly remembers what it used to be. Beneath it all, the karst system continues quietly, a network of caves and underground streams moving unseen below the lake. Somewhere in the darkness beneath Beaver Lake, the Ozark blind salamander goes about its life. No eyes, no light, no problem. Born with eyes that seal over as it matures, it hunts using pressure sensors along its body, detecting the faintest movement in the water and sensing prey before it knows it's hunted. The caves maintain a near-constant temperature year-round, so it never experiences seasons. No winter, no summer, just one long, dark, unchanging tunnel of a life. In a stable, predator-free environment, it lives far longer than similar salamanders. Slow metabolism, low stress, no need to rush. Above it all, where sunlight reaches and seasons matter, Hobbs State Park lines the shore. Trails, forest and open water, over a hidden world below. It's the largest state park in Arkansas, yet it stays genuinely uncrowded. Most people drive past to the lake, so the trails feel far more private than they should. The forest standing here now grew back almost entirely on its own after decades of farming and logging, an unplanned recovery that's still not finished. In dry years, the water recedes, exposing muddy lake bed not shown on any map. Hikers stumble onto it and aren't sure what they're seeing. The great blue heron knows exactly what that exposed shoreline means. Easy access, shallow water, and breakfast served fresh if you're willing to wait long enough. Despite standing nearly 4 feet tall with a 6-foot wingspan, the bird weighs just about 5 pounds, hollow bones allowing it to lift off almost instantly. Along the shoreline, this heron often defends fishing territory against rivals, other birds, and even the occasional kayaker drifting too close. When hunting, it becomes nearly invisible in plain sight, holding motionless until fish stop registering danger. Then it unleashes a strike so quick it's difficult to track. That attack is a full-force spear, driven by a neck that coils and releases like a spring, delivering enough impact to stun prey on contact. Fish are always swallowed head first, a necessity to prevent tails from lodging in the throat, a detail the species never ignores. Heat brings a different adaptation. Wings droop and throat muscles flutter to regulate temperature, a far less dignified version of its usual stillness. Its call breaks the illusion entirely, a loud prehistoric squawk that catches most visitors off guard the first time they hear it. That same sense of patience and observation extends into Devil's Den State Park, where caves, stone formations, and forest trails reward anyone willing to slow down and notice details. Its name comes from its maze of dark crevice caves and steep terrain, once used by outlaws on the Butterfield stage route. So isolated and lawless, locals called it the Devil's Den. Later, it was shaped further by the Civilian Conservation Corps, whose stone cabins and retaining walls remain, blending into the rock as if they were part of it from the beginning. The same formations open into tight, twisting crevice caves, narrow enough to force sideways movement, yet complex enough to disorient anyone without clear direction. Local legend says settlers heard strange, low sounds rising from underground at night, enough to give the place a reputation still mentioned around campfires today. Deeper in the same cool darkness lives something far rarer, the Ozark big-eared bat, one of North America's most endangered, hanging in near total silence away from light. Its ears are nearly as long as its entire body, working like satellite dishes, picking up sound bouncing off cave walls to hunt and navigate without ever needing to see. The entire known population could fit inside a single large room, which makes every roost in Devil's Den not just unusual, but genuinely critical. Above all of this darkness, the Ozarks break open completely, and at Hawksbill Crag, a single rock shelf juts out over the valley, with nothing between it and the horizon, but open air. The name comes from its shape, a narrow sandstone ledge that hooks out like a hawk's bill, hanging over a several 100-foot drop. It became one of Arkansas's most photographed spots through word of mouth alone. Hikers sharing images that looked almost too dramatic to be real. Here the wind shifts fast and without warning, which turns a calm morning photo into a much more focused experience. The warnings on the trailhead sign are not something to ignore. On clear days, weather systems moving in from the west are visible long before they arrive, giving the crag an almost observatory quality that catches most visitors off guard. That river valley spreading out below leads straight into Tonka, a small riverside village tucked between dramatic bluffs where the Buffalo River sets the pace for everything. It has no stoplight, no grocery store, no gas station. Yet it pulls visitors from across the country, which says everything about what the bluffs and the quiet here actually offer. The village sits in a bowl of sandstone bluffs that rise sharply on all sides, trapping morning fog low to the ground, and on some days leaving it feeling slightly outside of time. Flooding isn't rare here. When the river rises, it rises fast, climbing the bluffs and reshaping everything in its path. That same uncompromising character follows the road, where Grand Falls spills wide across rocky ledges in a sheet of moving water that leaves people momentarily speechless. It's the state's largest continuously flowing waterfall. Not the tallest, but the widest, spreading across Chert Rock like the river ran out of ground. Unlike most waterfalls that dry to a trickle in summer, it runs year-round, fed by Shoal Creek, moving even in the driest months when everything else nearby has slowed to a crawl. After heavy rain, the falls transform, almost beyond recognition. The water turns a dark amber, doubles in speed, and roars loud enough to feel in your chest before you ever see it. Jasper, across the state line, answers that energy with something different. Cliffs, open drives, and a town quiet enough that you actually notice the scenery surrounding it. Newton County, where Jasper sits, is entirely rural, no urban areas at all, with fewer people across its hills than in a single city apartment building. From there, backroads wind through sharp cliff scenery, where locals have seen more than a few overconfident drivers learn that scenic doesn't mean easy. The rock faces nearby shift with the light. Orange and rust at midday, heavy shadow by late afternoon. So the same drive can look completely different depending on when you take it. Just off a winding trail, along a forest path most people walk past, Alum Cove Natural Bridge waits, a stone arch carved by water, sitting in the trees like it has nothing to prove. The name comes from alum seeps in the rock, which left streaks on the stone that early settlers collected for medicine and fabric dyeing. Step beneath it, and the temperature shifts immediately. The stone blocks the sun and traps cold air, making it noticeably cooler than the surrounding trail. That same river-carved terrain continues nearby at War Eagle Mill, a historic mill beside flowing water that was grinding grain long before Arkansas was even a state. It has burned down and been rebuilt multiple times, always on the same spot beside War Eagle Creek, as if the location itself refused to be abandoned. In calm weather, the creek runs clear to the bottom. After heavy rain, it rises fast, turns red with clay, and can flood the lowland within hours. The mill still runs today, grinding corn and wheat the same water-powered way it always has. And you can buy the flour it makes. Just downstream, the creek passes beneath War Eagle Bridge, connecting the mill to the road as it has for well over a century. It's one of the last wooden truss bridges in the state, a once common Ozark design now mostly replaced by concrete and steel. Built to carry wagons, it still carries traffic today, with a weight limit that modern trucks routinely ignore until someone reminds them why it's there. Photographers and filmmakers use it so often, it shows up in publications, paintings and films. Usually unrecognised because it looks like the wooden bridge everyone imagines. That quiet persistence doesn't end here. The road carries it north to Van Buren, a small town sitting at the edge of the Ozark river systems where the real water begins. It is located in one of the most sparsely populated counties in Missouri, so rural that the nearest large grocery store requires a drive most city dwellers would consider a road trip. The town runs almost entirely on people passing through, a resupply stop for float trips and outdoor expeditions that has kept its doors open for generations. Flooding isn't an exception here. It's a recurring fact of life, and locals have developed a calm, almost casual relationship with high water that genuinely surprises first-time visitors. The seclusion doesn't stop here. Natural Falls State Park keeps it going, with a waterfall so well hidden by surrounding trees, it feels like a place that wasn't meant to be found. Surprisingly, the falls drop nearly 77 feet into a sandstone grotto, making it one of Oklahoma's tallest waterfalls. The gorge stays cool and heavily shaded, allowing plant life more typical of southeastern forests to grow in a microclimate the surrounding terrain doesn't prepare you for. After heavy rain, mist rolls far enough to reach the overlook, something the signage mentions calmly, though it's routinely underestimated until people are already damp. Down the trail, sound fades almost immediately, leaving only moving water and a silence that feels intentional rather than empty. Beyond this pocket of stillness, Mark Twain National Forest opens up the scale, a sweep of Ozark hills, rivers and woodlands so massive it makes Natural Falls feel like a warm-up. Spanning nearly 1.5 million acres in disconnected sections, it's possible to drive out, pass through a town, and re-enter the forest without ever feeling like it's been left behind. Once heavily logged in the late 1800s, the land was nearly stripped bare. What exists today is the result of a full-scale, natural regrowth from near collapse. Beneath the surface lies karst terrain, riddled with caves, sinkholes, and underground streams. In some places, trail hikers have even broken through thin rock crust, exactly as unsettling as it sounds. At Greer Spring, a powerful surge of cold, clear water feeds the forest river system, reshaping the 11-point river with a steady output that quietly dominates everything downstream. As Missouri's second largest spring, it releases enough water each day to fill an Olympic pool multiple times over, while holding a near constant temperature through every season. That flow starts miles underground, moving through limestone before surfacing here, cold, filtered, and strong enough to carve its own channel through the forest floor. In a rare setup, the spring rises from two outlets that merge into one, with enough force to briefly push back the river's current, a reversal water rarely makes in nature. Access stays deliberately raw, no pavement, no guardrails, no gift shop, so reaching it demands effort rather than convenience. From here, the 11-point river carries the water onward as a designated scenic river, steady current, clear water, and a forest that keeps the outside world far away. It was one of the original 8 rivers protected under the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, where the federal government stepped in early to stop development and preserve it as it was. The water stays cold year-round thanks to springs like Greer, creating trout habitat most Missouri rivers can't match, and anglers come specifically for that consistency. Along its course, the banks remain mostly undeveloped. No cabins, docks, or commercial access. So floating, it feels less like recreation, and more like drifting through a place untouched by the modern world. After heavy rain, the river rises fast and turns unpredictable. Calm water can become dangerous within hours, catching first-time floaters off guard. Farther downstream, the road narrows into Gilbert, one of the smallest towns in the country, sitting along the Buffalo River with a population that wouldn't fill a school bus. At its peak, it had a general store, post office, and ferry crossing that made it an essential stop for surrounding communities. Today, most of it is gone, and what's left fits on a single street. The Buffalo River floods the town regularly and without negotiation. The water rolls through the main street like it owns the place, which, historically speaking, it does. Isolation crept in gradually as roads bypassed it, and the river stopped being the main way anyone got anywhere. A town that was once connected slowly became one that wasn't. Despite its size, it draws a steady stream of canoeists and kayakers who stop mid-float, making its small general store one of the most surprisingly well-visited spots on the entire river corridor. The current eventually pulls paddlers to the Mulberry, a wilder, faster river with a reputation for whitewater that gets people's full and undivided attention. After heavy rain, it can rise 20 feet in a matter of hours, fast enough that experienced guides treat weather reports like mandatory reading, not a suggestion. The Mulberry runs undammed for its entire length, which is increasingly rare in the American South. No reservoir, no controlled release, just a river doing exactly what it wants. That freedom comes with real consequences. Locals are quick to remind newcomers that a river this fast doesn't reward overconfidence, and the record backs them up. The hills beyond the river lead to Mountain View, a place that treats traditional Ozark culture not as a curiosity, but as a way of life. On any weekend, musicians gather on the courthouse square to play old-time folk and bluegrass with no schedule, no tickets, and no stage. That spirit is formalised in name as well. Mountain View declared itself the folk music capital of the world, and then quietly committed to actually earning it. Just outside town, the Ozark Folk Centre State Park is devoted to preserving traditional crafts and music, where blacksmiths and soap makers still work as they did 150 years ago. The town square is lined with early 1900s stone buildings, small storefronts, wooden porches, and hand-painted signs that make it feel like it never updated. South of here is Montenay, a once popular resort, now sitting at the bottom of a reservoir, surfacing like a ghost when the water gets low. Built by William Hope Harvey, who believed civilization would collapse, it once had the world's largest log hotels, Arkansas's first indoor pool and golf course, and a 50-foot Venetian gondola. When the resort failed financially, Harvey didn't walk away. He started building a 130-foot stone pyramid meant to serve as a time capsule for whatever civilization came next. The Army Corps of Engineers flooded the valley to create Beaver Lake, submerging Montenay, whose ruins now surface at low water and draw crowds. Exactly what Harvey wanted. Elsewhere in the Ozarks, a similar transformation occurred on a larger scale. Table Rock Dam flooded an entire stretch of river, forming one of the biggest lakes in the region. It spans tens of thousands of acres and reaches depths of over 100 feet in places. A body of water so massive it took years to fully fill after the dam was closed. When the valley was flooded, entire communities disappeared underwater. Farms, roads, cemeteries, and homesteads, families had worked for generations. Beneath that surface, the Ozark bedrock creates unusually clear conditions for a reservoir this size. Visibility can still reach up to 20 feet in some areas. Its clarity draws scuba divers to explore what's left below. Old bridge foundations, building ruins, and roads still tracing the original valley floor. All of it, the water, the power, the controlled flooding, comes back to one structure holding everything in place, a single system that reshaped everything around it. Table Rock Dam stretches across the White River and stands over 20 stories tall, built from enough concrete to pave a 2-lane highway from Missouri to the Pacific coast. The dam generates hydroelectric power from the water it holds back, supplying hundreds of thousands of homes, a system running continuously since it's switched on. When storms push the lake too high, the floodgates open and release water at massive speed, a controlled surge that protects communities hundreds of miles downstream. The log chapel of the Ozarks sits just ahead, a small log chapel perched on a ridge with nothing around it but trees, stone, and an extraordinary view. It was built entirely by hand using timber cut from the surrounding hills. No architect, no blueprint, just someone who found the right ridge and got to work. The chapel holds only a handful of people at a time, so weddings here are intimate by necessity. Couples book it years in advance, mostly for the view. What comes next is bigger in every sense. Mount Magazine waits to the southwest, the tallest point in Arkansas, sitting above everything else with nothing blocking the sky. The summit runs flat across the top, which is unusual. A broad plateau rather than a sharp peak, giving it more in common with a mesa than a traditional mountain. That flat top creates its own weather. Fog rolls in fast, storms build without warning, and conditions can shift from clear to zero visibility in under an hour. Along the southern cliffs, hang gliders launch into thermals that build along the exposed edge. On a good day, a skilled pilot can stay airborne for miles without touching the controls. Those same updrafts attract a far older aviator, the Peregrine Falcon, which shares these cliffs and tolerates the hang gliders with what can only be described as mild indifference. Holding the highest ground almost by default, it uses elevated perches as observation points across the cliff face, returning to the same kinds of ledges with remarkable consistency. From those vantage points, it sits bolt upright and motionless, scanning in slow, deliberate turns. A stillness so complete, it makes everything around it feel unsettled by comparison. The face is just as distinctive. A dark helmet of feathers with a bold black stripe running down each cheek, giving it a permanently focused expression that matches its personality exactly. Up close, the chest is cream to pale orange, with dense dark streaking running downward. Less like a bird, more like something designed in a wind tunnel and then painted to match. In a full dive, it folds its wings tight and drops at over 240 miles per hour, hitting prey mid-air before the target even registers the threat. To handle that speed, a specialised notch in its beak disrupts airflow into its nostrils, preventing the wind pressure from making breathing impossible during the descent. After a strike, it carries its prey to a high exposed ledge where it plucks feathers methodically before eating, unhurried and entirely unbothered by the drop below. Further below these cliffs, the hills close in around Ork, a remote mountain community that has relied on one general store for longer than most towns have existed. The general store has been running continuously since the 1800s. Same building, same location, same purpose, long after everything around it changed. For decades, it was the only nearby place mountain families could buy supplies, cash checks, and get news. A single building doing the work of an entire town centre. The community never grew into a proper town. No traffic lights, no chain stores, no sprawl. Just people who chose the kind of quiet most places traded away long ago. The hills eventually give way to Petit Jean State Park. Cliffs, canyons, waterfalls, and a story attached to the land that people don't forget quickly. It takes its name from a French girl who, legend says, disguised herself as a boy to follow her explorer lover to the New World, reached this mountain, fell ill, and never left. Whether the story is true or not, her name stuck, and the mountain, the river, and the state park all carry it, which is a lot of geography for one person's legend to cover. It's also Arkansas's first state park, established in the 1920s, when protecting land for public use was still considered a fairly radical idea in the American South. The sandstone beneath the park has been carving canyons for longer than anyone can imagine, with formations that look less like geology and more like something that shouldn't exist. At the edge of one canyon, Cedar Falls drops in a single curtain of water, one of the state's most dramatic waterfalls, the kind that stops conversation. It drops more than 90 feet straight into the canyon, and after heavy rain the flow doubles, with mist that reaches far enough to soak anyone who gets close, which most people still do. The canyon walls are layered sandstone, carved by thousands of years of freeze, thaw, and slow collapse. The rock tells the story if you know where to look. Cut directly into the rock face, the trail to the base is steep enough that the park carved steps into stone, a detail that feels minor until you're on it, looking straight down. Above the falls, Mather Lodge holds its ground at the rim, stone-built, unhurried, with a front porch that looks straight out over everything Cedar Falls just fell into. Built in the 1930s by the Civilian Conservation Corps, a Depression-era program that put unemployed young men to work, building parks and trails. The construction used stone pulled directly from the surrounding canyon, which is why the building looks like it grew out of the ridge rather than was placed on it. It has operated continuously since it opened, with guests falling asleep to the sound of cedar falls for nearly a century. Not a bad arrangement by any standard. At night, the canyon below goes completely dark and completely quiet, except for one sound that carries up through the trees, with great clarity and zero apology. It belongs to the barred owl, a forest bird that has claimed these wooded canyon walls as its own, and announces that fact every evening, whether anyone is listening or not. Unlike most owls, it is perfectly comfortable calling in broad daylight. It doesn't wait for dark or silence, it simply calls when it wants, which is often. Hunting is done as much by sound as sight. Its hearing is precise enough to locate a mouse moving under a layer of leaves in complete darkness, then drop on it without hesitation. It has no ear tufts, a round, soft face, and dark eyes that give it the permanent expression of someone deeply unimpressed, which, given its hunting record, it has every right to be. Barred owls mate for life, and tend to stay within the same territory for decades, often occupying a single stretch of forest for long periods. Where they overlap with spotted owls, competition turns direct, and barred owls frequently push the other species out, steadily expanding their range westward. And with that, the canyon grows quiet. The mist from cedar falls drifts up through the trees, and the region settles into the kind of stillness they do better than almost anywhere. This is the Ozarks, a land of hidden wonders and remarkable architectural marvels. Now, if you don't want to miss the most unreal wonders of Michigan's Upper Peninsula, check out this video.